Welcome to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, the podcast where intelligence meets real-world events. This week, Neil Bisson, Director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired CSIS Intelligence Officer, takes us through a fast-moving series of developments in espionage, cyber warfare, and extremism. We begin with a joint Canada-United States advisory warning that technology startups face an overlooked but serious threat. International pitch competitions. We'll also revisit the Typhoon Cyber campaign, the sprawling Chinese state-linked operation that has already penetrated more than 80 countries. New intelligence confirms Canadian infrastructure has been compromised, highlighting just how embedded these actors have become in critical systems, and how long-term the threat truly is. Across Europe, security services dismantled a Belarusian spy network stretching across multiple countries. While tensions rise as Poland confronts Minsk over espionage arrests and the expulsion of a diplomat. And back here in Canada, an Ottawa man tied to a neo-Nazi group has been sentenced to 10 years for producing extremist propaganda, marking a precedent-setting case in countering domestic extremism. Stay with us as we break down what these stories mean for global security, Canada's resilience, and the strategies authoritarian adversaries continue to deploy. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, the Director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network and a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. Every week, I take the leading international stories on espionage, sabotage, national security, and terrorism and break them down using insight and analysis to provide you with the same intelligence used by governments and corporations to help stay safe and ahead of the ever-growing threats we face in today's world. It's been another week full of spy network crackdowns, cyber attacks, and terrorist acts. From Belarus spies being identified in Europe to US and Canadian tech startups being warned about Chinese infiltration. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. For our first story this week, US and Canadian intelligence agencies issued a joint warning about an overlooked but serious espionage risk affecting Western technology startups. International pitch competitions. Authorities caution that these events, often billed as opportunities for innovation exposure, can be exploited by hostile actors and pilfer intellectual property and recruit talent. The advisory, issued by the U.S. Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or ODNI, the National Counterintelligence and Security Center, or NCSC, the U.S. Air Force Office of Special Investigation, or AFOSI, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, highlights the subtle but sophisticated methods used by foreign adversaries. Hostile entities, especially those with ties to the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, leverage pitch events to initiate, quote, bait and switch, schemes, or, quote, talent grabs. These tactics often involve long-term cultivation through innovation summits or networking forums, enabling adversaries to ship small investments or contributions ahead of more significant infiltration. One such case saw a startup's algorithm reverse engineered after 2 years of covert involvement. Pitch competitions have become a global phenomenon, occurring across countries like the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK. While these platforms are designed to promote entrepreneurship, they can also act as vectors for subtle espionage, particularly when sponsors have hidden state affiliations. Open source collaborations are another point of vulnerability, with foreign actors injecting compromised codes into public repositories, ultimately embedding backdoors in commercial products. Analysts say the guidance signals a shifting awareness. Innovation platforms are no longer safe zones absent of counterintelligence measures. By exposing these risks and encouraging proactive vetting, such as backdoor checks on competition hosts, restricting sensitive data in public pitch decks, and securing only necessary information under vetted NDAs, the agencies aim to cultivate a culture of operational security and the tech ecosystem. The world of state espionage and corporate espionage are emerging. Countries like China have long engaged in technology and research theft to advance their own government-funded companies and corporations to increase their own innovations. This tactic is also used to further their reach and influence in Western countries, and this warning demonstrates another tactic being employed. The alert underscores that even benevolent-sounding venues like pitch competitions can mask long-term threats to strategic tech leadership. If startups fail to adopt preventative protocols, this may unknowingly facilitate technology transfers that advance adversarial capabilities with significant economic or national security implications. For this next segment, I'll stick with the joint advisory by CSIS in partnership with multiple U.S. agencies warning startups about the subtle but serious threat international pitch competitions. These forums, often marketed as opportunities for innovation and investment, may serve as front doors for hostile state actors, particularly China, to gain access to intellectual property, recruit talent, and harvest sensitive data. According to the advisory, foreign adversaries use these pitch events as a platform to extract valuable innovations under the guise of collaboration or funding. By encouraging startups to share technical details and business strategies, organizers aligned with foreign governments can identify, replicate, or even steal key technologies. In some cases, companies have reported their algorithms or designs have been reverse engineered after engaging with investors or judges who had hidden state affiliations. This warning aligns with reporting from multiple outlets. Clear Jobs highlighted how U.S. and Canadian agencies see innovation forums as a long-term espionage vector, noting schemes like bait-and-switch investments and talent targeting. The Globe and Mail and The Logic both underscored the role of Chinese-linked organizations such as the China Association for Science and Technology, or CAST, in organizing events abroad. CAST, while outwardly promoting innovation, has been identified as facilitating state technology transfer efforts. For years, CSIS has warned about foreign interference in Canada's universities, research partnerships, and critical industries. This advisory extends that caution into the entrepreneurial world, where small startups, often eager for exposure and funding, may underestimate the risks. Unlike large corporations with in-house security and legal teams, startups can be uniquely vulnerable to covert technology acquisition. The advisory outlines several concrete steps. 1. Do your homework on event organizers and sponsors. 2. Protect your IP with patents before presenting. 3. Control disclosures. Share only what's necessary. 4. Use NDAs and legal protections when possible. 5. Report suspicious approaches to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service or U.S. counterparts. CSIS Director Dan Roger emphasized, Canadian tech startups are essential to the Canadian economy and should protect themselves from potential threats or exploitation by threat actors. Analysts note that this joint advisory reflects a growing recognition that economic security and national security are intertwined. By targeting startups at their earliest and most vulnerable stages, adversaries can undermine Canada's future competitive advantage, particularly in emerging fields like AI, quantum computing, and biotech. This joint Canada-US warning reframes the way we think about espionage. It doesn't just happen in embassies or through spies in trench coats. More and more it happens at tech conferences, an innovation summit, or a pitch night. For Canadian startups, the message is clear. Vigilance is no longer optional. Protecting intellectual property and being secretive about what you share publicly are now as critical as the innovation itself. In last week's episode, we unpacked the aggressive scope of Salt Typhoon, the Chinese state-linked hacking operation targeting telecommunications worldwide. This week, the story intensifies as it has been confirmed that Canada has also successfully been targeted. Originally focused on U.S. telecom providers, Salt Typhoon has now penetrated over 80 countries, tapping into global networks, high-profile communications, and even wiretap systems used by law enforcement. Recent intelligence reveals that Canadian telecom infrastructure was breached in early 2025. At least 3 network edge devices were compromised, allowing continuous data collection and potential access to broader national networks. Beyond telecom firms, the campaign's reach now appears to include government, military, transportation, and lodging sectors, reflecting a strategic shift towards deep, systemic infiltration of critical infrastructure. Salt Typhoon is managed by China's Ministry of State Security and has operated at scale since at least 2023. It employs sophisticated tactics like exploiting unpatched router vulnerabilities and deploying persistent access channels within supply chains. While early revelations focused on U.S. telecom impact, the campaign's footprint spans government communications, civilian data, and now Canada's cyber fabric. Canadian authorities, including the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, warned that this cyber threat will likely persist for years, emphasizing the need for heightened vigilance across sectors. Cybersecurity experts are sounding the alarm. Salt Typhoon isn't merely an espionage operation, it's a wake-up call. By embedding within foundational systems like telecom routers, it enables broad surveillance, manipulation, and network compromise. For cities, governments, and businesses, the message is clear. Patch tirelessly, monitor aggressively, and architect systems against long-term subversion. Salt Typhoon's evolving footprint marks a new era in the state-sponsored cyber aggression. Canada, like its allies, is squarely in the crosshairs. As the threat grows in professionalism and reach, so must our defenses. I recently wrote a Substack article entitled Salt Typhoon Tactics: How Data Breaches Feed Psychological Influence Campaigns. For those who are interested, I'll leave a link in the transcript. We move on to our major story this week. European intelligence agencies from the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Romania announced the successful dismantling of a covert Belarusian spy network operating across several countries. The operation led to the expulsion of a Belarusian diplomat functioning under diplomatic cover accused of espionage. Czech counterintelligence, or the BIS, in coordination with its Hungarian and Romanian counterparts, and with the assistance of Eurojust, tracked and dismantled a network allegedly orchestrated by Belarus's KGB. Eurojust is a European Union's agency for criminal justice cooperation headquartered in The Hague. It helps member states coordinate cross-border prosecutions by sharing evidence, resolving jurisdictional issues, and setting up joint investigations. In practice, this gives intelligence services a legal backbone, turning collected intelligence into coordinated arrests, prosecutions, and dismantling of espionage networks that operate across multiple European countries. Among those implicated was a former high-ranking Moldovan intelligence officer prosecuted on treason charges for passing classified information to Belarusian agents during meetings in Budapest. This demonstrates the network's reach and the severity of the threat posed to European security. Belarus has long aligned itself with Russia and has increasingly become a venue for intelligence operations that bolster Moscow's strategic posture in Europe. The use of diplomatic travel rights to facilitate espionage, repeatedly warned against by BIS head Michael Kodelka, underscores existing vulnerabilities within the Schengen framework. The network's penetration reflects the broader challenge of balancing open borders with effective counterintelligence measures. Intelligence circles are calling this a watershed moment in reinforcing intra-European cooperation. Analysts point out that coordinating arrest and legal actions through agencies like Eurojust creates a model for future joint operations. This move also serves as a cautionary signal to other authoritarian regimes leveraging diplomatic immunity to advance covert agendas. By disrupting a sophisticated espionage network, European partners not only neutralized an immediate threat, but also demonstrated that shared intelligence and prosecutional cooperation remain vital tools in preserving regional security. It may also prompt tighter scrutiny of diplomatic privileges granted under the Schengen regime. We continue with the story in our next segment, focusing on the sharp escalation of tensions between Belarus and Poland, as Minsk has detained a Polish Carmelite monk, Grzegorz Gałę, on espionage charges. The arrest took place in Lapel amid mounting regional unease over upcoming joint military exercises with Russia. Belarusian authorities accused Gałę of obtaining a classified document related to the upcoming Zapad 25 military drills. State-run media aired footage showing the monk turned over the secret document to authorities. He was reportedly carrying multiple currencies and a SIM card registered in someone else's name. A Belarusian national was arrested alongside him, allegedly recruited via social media and promises of gifts and money. Poland immediately denounced the arrest as a provocation, with Prime Minister Donald Tusk vowing a forceful response. Warsaw strongly refuted any involvement in espionage, and security officials emphasized that monks are not used by Polish intelligence services. The incident further strains already fragile ties between the two countries, magnified by Belarus's alignment with Russia and its role in hosting military exercises close to NATO borders. Analysts see this as a politically charged move by the Lukashenko regime. The use of state media to broadcast the arrest suggests a calculated effort to assert vigilance or perhaps intimidation in the face of Western scrutiny. The staging of the arrest and publicizing it may serve both internal messaging and external power signaling. The detention of a Polish monk on espionage charges represents a dangerous escalation. It reinforces the narrative of distrust between Belarus and Poland and poses a challenge to diplomatic norms. How Warsaw responds could significantly impact the tenor of Eastern European security dynamics in the days ahead. Given the sheer enormity of this story, we'll look at it from the perspective of some of the different intelligence organizations involved. In a coordinated intelligence sweep, agencies from the Czech Republic, Romania, and Hungary dismantled a Belarus-linked espionage network operating across Europe. The Czech Counterintelligence Service revealed the network's ties to the Belarusian KGB, underscoring how diplomats' privileges in the Schengen mobility were exploited for intelligence gathering. This operation shows how autocratic states like Belarus leveraging diplomatic immunity and regional travel freedoms within the Schengen zone to deploy espionage networks across multiple nations. Collaboration between Czech, Romanian, and Hungarian services, along with Eurojust prosecutional coordination, illustrates an effective multilateral response to hybrid threats. Let's break down the key developments. 1. Czech authorities declared a Belarusian diplomat persona non grata and expelled them, citing misuse of diplomatic cover. 2. Romania arrested a former deputy head of Moldova's intelligence service on treason charges and tied to handing classified information to Belarusian operatives during meetings in Budapest. 3. Czech intelligence leaders emphasized the need to restrict the free movement of Russian and Belarusian diplomats across Schengen, calling it a vulnerability allowing espionage networks to flourish. The operation highlights the importance of robust cross-border cooperation in countering espionage threats. Belarus, as mentioned, is aligned with Moscow and has increasingly become a focal point in the West's intelligence battle against Russian influence operations. The incident follows earlier Czech actions exposing Russian operatives, signaling sustained focus on gray zone tactics and hybrid threat resilience. So what are some of the implications for intelligence and security? First, diplomatic cover as an espionage vector. This case reaffirms that diplomatic roles can conceal active intelligence operatives targeting Western institutions. Allies of Russia will use their diplomatic officers as cover for intelligence operations. This is a warning to Western national security intelligence agencies to look beyond the usual suspect. Second, need for enhanced movement controls. Calls to limit the Schengen mobility reflect a broader reassessment of how diplomatic immunity can be weaponized. Open border policies have clear detriments concerning this type of activity. Third, model for regional security collaboration. The involvement of Eurojust in joint national efforts set a precedent for future collective responses to transnational intelligence threats. Canada and the United States must be looking to the collaborative work being done by Eurojust and the intelligence organizations involved in this case to learn from them and incorporate their tactics and techniques. Europe's ability to swiftly coordinate among national agencies and EU institutions allowed it to disrupt a dangerous espionage network. But the implications go deeper. As adversaries adapt, Western democracies must rethink policies around diplomatic movements and upgrade scrutiny over foreign accreditation. This episode isn't just a headline, it's a strategic lesson in vigilance through collaboration against authoritarian regimes who target Western alliances through their proxy countries. Let's now take a look at some of the particulars of this case, which underscores the continuing tensions between Poland and Belarus, as well as broader security concerns facing NATO's eastern flank. According to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, one of the arrested individuals was gathering intelligence on Poland's military infrastructure and NATO deployments. Espionage cases like this highlight how Belarus continues to play a destabilizing role in the region. The expulsion of a Belarusian diplomat is a strong retaliatory measure, signaling Poland's intent to respond firmly to foreign intelligence activity on its soil. From an intelligence perspective, the arrest demonstrates both the vigilance of Poland's counterintelligence services and the persistent threat environment facing NATO countries bordering Russia and Belarus. This is not the first time that Poland has dealt with foreign espionage. In recent years, Polish authorities have arrested multiple individuals linked to Russian and Belarusian intelligence networks. These networks often targeted transportation hubs, energy facilities, and military installations, critical infrastructure that would be valuable and vulnerable in the event of a heightened conflict. The ongoing war in the Ukraine has amplified these concerns, as Belarus has served as a staging ground for Russian forces and intelligence activities. Polish officials have emphasized that Belarus is operating as a proxy for Moscow, carrying out intelligence gathering and influence operations designed to weaken NATO's cohesion. Analysts warn that as Russia faces pressure in Ukraine, its reliance on Belarusian territory and operatives will likely expand, putting additional strain on European security services. From my perspective, this case highlights the hybrid nature of modern espionage, where diplomatic cover, cyber tools, and human assets are all deployed to undermine adversaries. Poland's arrest of a Belarusian spy and decision to expel a diplomat illustrate the growing importance of counterintelligence in the face of regional threats. As tensions between NATO and Russia remain high, we can expect more cases like this across Eastern Europe. For Canada and its allies, the lesson is clear. Vigilance and readiness are critical as espionage and foreign interference remain key tools of authoritarian states. We're back in Canada for our final segment this week. We're revisiting a case I first covered in April of last year. At that time, I discussed the conviction of Patrick Gordon MacDonald, an Ottawa resident better known by his online alias Dark Foreigner, who was found guilty of producing propaganda for the Ottawa Division, a designated terrorist entity. Now, MacDonald has been sentenced to 10 years in prison, marking a pivotal moment in Canada's approach to prosecuting domestic extremism. During his trial, MacDonald was convicted on 3 counts: participating in the activity of a terrorist group, facilitating terrorist activity, and willful promotion of hatred. His role was central in creating and distributing propaganda materials designed to glorify the Ottawa Division's violent neo-Nazi ideology. With this sentencing, the Canadian courts have reinforced that not only the actors but also the propagandists of extremist groups can face significant prison time. As I explained when I first looked at this case back in April of 2024, McDonald's involvement with the Ottawa went beyond online chatter. He actively created videos and imagery to recruit members, spreading messages of racial hatred and incitement of violence. His activities highlighted how extremist groups weaponize digital platforms to amplify their ideology, recruit vulnerable individuals, and build transnational networks. The Ottawa Division itself has been tied to violent incidences and plots across several countries, which led to terrorist designation in Canada and elsewhere. McDonald's conviction and now his sentencings demonstrate that Canada's judiciary's willingness to confront this challenge head-on. Legal experts view this case as precedent-setting because it combines terrorism and hate propaganda statutes. It shows that the justice system can adapt to evolving hybrid threats posed by online radicalization. From an intelligence standpoint, the sentencing reinforces the principle of countering domestic extremism, which requires targeting not only those who would carry out violence, but also those who fuel the movement with propaganda and recruitment tools. The 10-year sentence given to Patrick Gordon MacDonald sends a strong signal. Canada is prepared to use its full legal arsenal to counter the threat posed by extremist propaganda. By addressing the nexus of hate speech and terrorism, this case underscores both the evolving landscape of national security threats and the determination to confront them before they metastasize into violence. We first covered the story back in April of 2024. I'll leave a link to the episode at the end of the video. This recent sentencing shows how long and complex these prosecutions can be, but also how vital they are for Canada's national security. Well, that's it for this week's episode. As always, the links in the segments discussed in this podcast are in the transcript. I want to inform my listeners of an upcoming opportunity to check out a very topical intelligence and international security discussion. The Pillar Society, a non-profit group of former Canadian intelligence professionals, will be hosting a speaker series on October 14th at the Shankman Centre in Orleans, Ontario at 7 p.m. We are fortunate to have Lauren C. Anderson, a former FBI executive and global security and risk governance leader, who will be discussing, from her perspective, which is an insider view, the landscape under the current U.S. government, its impact on the U.S. national security community, and the implications for Canada and our Five Eye partners. I will leave a link for purchase of the tickets in the show notes and the transcript. I highly recommend buying your tickets early as this event is likely to sell out. Until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That concludes this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. We explored the hidden risks facing startups at international pitch competitions, the expanding footprint of Salt Typhoon inside Canada's cyber infrastructure, the dismantling of a Belarusian spy network in Europe, and the sentencing of a Canadian extremist tied to the Atomwaffen division. Each of these stories underscores a simple truth. Espionage, cyber operations, and extremism are not distant problems. They shape our economy, our security, and our daily lives. A tremendous amount of research, time, and effort goes into every episode. If you find value in the insights, analysis, and intelligence provided here, I encourage you to support the podcast. Visit Buzzsprout to contribute a one-time donation or become a regular contributor. Your support keeps these important conversations alive and ensures they continue reaching a wider audience. Don't forget to subscribe, share the show, and leave a review. It really does make a difference in growing our community of listeners. And like Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.